Welcome to National Ernie Pyle Day 2025. I'm Michael Brainard with the Ernie Pyle Legacy Foundation. Thanks for being here. We've got a special guest this year, Pulitzer Prize winning columnist George Will of the Washington Post. And I'll tell you more about that in a bit. But first, today is Ernie's 125th birthday, so let's light some candles on that cake for him. It's been a pretty special year for us at the foundation. April 18th marked the 80th anniversary of Ernie's passing, so some of us traveled to Honolulu for a special service at the National Memorial Cemetery of the Pacific. And our board president, Tom Cowan, even headed all the way to Ieshima in Okinawa, Japan to join American Legion Post OK-28 for their annual commemoration at the Ernie Pyle Monument erected by the U.S. Army's 77th Infantry Division. Being there reminded us why we do this, to keep Ernie's legacy alive and well. Another highlight has been the launch of the complete works of Ernie Pyle on Substack. For the first time ever, we're publishing every column and story that he ever wrote, unedited and in order. It's a passion project for our board and volunteers, and, well, we can't wait for you to subscribe and dive in. Now, on Memorial Day of this year, George Will wrote a column about Ernie Pyle, so we reached out in hope that he would talk to us, and so he did. We talked about a few things, including the craft of writing columns, how telling stories about Americans has changed since Ernie's time, and why our Complete Works project on Substack is such a big deal. I think you'll love hearing what he has to say, so grab a seat, relax, and help us celebrate National Ernie Pyle Day with George Will. All right, George, thank you for being here with us on National Ernie Pyle Day, August 3rd, 2025.
Glad to be with you.
This also happens to be Ernie's 125th anniversary of his birthday, August 3rd, 2025. And the reason we asked you to come on this time with us is that you came onto our radar as an Ernie Pyle guy for your May 23rd column on Memorial Day, Ernie Pyle, Captain Wasco, and the Common Soldiers Who Died for America. And we're really fond of that piece. So you weave together your thoughts on Pyle and author David Krissinger's book, The Soldier's Truth, and then you wrap it up with a reminder for everybody to remember those soldiers that fought during the Italian campaign. What are your thoughts on Pyle? Give me a little George Will right now. That'd be great.
Well, I'm a Midwesterner. I'm from just a little ways west of Indiana in Champaign-Urbana, Illinois, where my father was for years, 37 years actually, a professor of philosophy at the University of Illinois. So I'm a Big Ten brat and a Midwest chauvinist. And I recognized instantly in Ernie Pyle as I read his stuff, I guess I'd call it a Midwestern voice. And it's a Midwestern voice really pertinent to today's political scene where the society's being roiled and torn apart by a lot of people who think that the coastal obsession of our politics and our culture is producing a kind of unequitable distribution of status, that what the coast calls flyover country, which is Ernie Pyle country, not just where he's from, but where so many of the people who wrote about were from, that this is being neglected and unappreciated. So it was a great, to discover Ernie Pyle was to discover someone who, I won't say spoke the language of the Midwest, but spoke in the tones of the Midwest, of appreciation with the men and women who run the hospitals and drive the trucks and grow the crops and truck them to town.
Yeah. How familiar are you with his pre-war writings?
Not very. You sent me a few, and again, there's a kind of seamlessness between what he was writing about and the way he was writing about it, who he was writing about before the war, and his natural proclivity for the same tone, the same subjects during the war.
Yeah, it's all present there, isn't it? And his sense of humor as well, that Midwest sense of humor that Mark Twain, uh, twinkle in his eye,
Dry, self-deprecating, and with an every once in a little flair for comic exaggeration. Very
Yeah.
Mark Twain, you say.
What do you think about him as a craftsman? You doing the same kind of craft, two a week, nigh on to forever. I mean, what do you do in the meantime while you're even while you're writing? I suppose there's a lot of staring at the wall, thinking.
Well, I love your use of the word craft, and I'll tell you why. I've published 16 books, one of which has sold more than the other 15 combined. And it's a book on baseball called Men at Work. The subtitle of Men at Work was The Craft of Baseball. And I use the word craft deliberately. Baseball's not an art. Journalism's not an art. I'm not an artist. I'm a writer, and I have a craft. And it's a craft with equal dignity to making shoes or butter or brick walls. It's a learned craft, but it's no more than a craft. But for that reason, it's still not to be disparaged, I like to think. It has the dignity that comes from honest work at some skills that have been learned over time. And I've got a pretty fancy education resume, Trinity College in Hartford, 2 years at Oxford, a PhD from Princeton. So if you want to wave credentials, I can wave them all day, but that's not the point. The point is what I do doesn't require that. It just requires craftsmanship. If someone sits down to make shoes, they know how to do it. They'd be hard put to say how they do it, but they do it. I found this out writing about the craft of baseball, that it's a very rare baseball player who can tell you how he does what he does or why he does it. He just does it because he's been doing it since T-ball and Little League and American Legion ball in high school and college and AAA and the rookie league and all the rest. If you do it long enough, you don't need to articulate how you do it. You just do it. And that's Ernie Pyle in a nutshell, I think.
Yeah, but the craft has been disparaged in the last how many years, where we don't know where to go to get our writers anymore.
Well,
We don't, you know.
I don't think journalism is being disparaged and criticized in recent years. What's being criticized vociferously and often justifiably is an abandonment of the craft of journalism, which is to tell a story and to tell it accurately and to tell it without a slant, which was Pyle's. He just mastered that craft. He'd sit down to eat K rations with these guys, and he'd get up and go write a story about it.
Yeah,
And the subjects and the context and the geography of where he was and the time, it didn't require anything.
yeah,
He was writing in the midst of one of the greatest dramas in human history, the Second World War. And that provided enough drama. He didn't need to add to it.
sure. And that particular story, the death of Captain Wasco, which has been spoken of ad nauseum by Ernie Pyle aficionados for the longest time. But it's still, as Joe Galloway said, that one shines like a full moon in the sky. His his uh, his writing is ready for today as well, which is one of the reasons why the Ernie Pyle Legacy Foundation started the complete works of Ernie Pyle on Substack, so that we can show the world again, not just talk about him, who he was and what he did and the milestones of his life, but to show on a day-to-day basis what he was, where he was, what he was doing, what he was writing about, America. So one of the things I wanted to bring up with you today was your latest column as of us talking, July 18th, which is called How Trump Dominates and Corrupts the Private Sector. And your first paragraph compares and contrasts the first 6 months of the Trump and the FDR presidencies.
To me, the contrast is this. FDR came in at a moment of tremendous national fear. Hence, all we have to fear is fear itself. Things just weren't working. We were at about 25% unemployment. People were terrified that they were consigned to depression forever. What little savings they had were in banks that were suddenly not secure. And Roosevelt set out to get institutions in place. The Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, a bank holiday to let the banks stabilize themselves. And the institutions later became Social Security and the National Labor Relations Act and a whole bunch of institutional changes that changed fundamentally the relationship of the citizen to the central government. What the current president is doing is less substantial in the sense that there aren't substantive institutions coming out of this. He's demonstrating how to wield power if you sort of ignore normal constitutional restraints like the separation of powers, which allocates some powers to the president and more power to Congress, and ignore certain norms. I mean, as we're speaking, the president has just said, Washington Redskins used to be the Redskins. Now they're the Commanders. They should go back to being the Washington Redskins. And the president has said the Cleveland Indians, that's a mistake. They should go back to they're now the Guardians. They should go back to being the Indians. And by the way, Coca-Cola ought to put cane sugar rather than corn syrup in the drinks. No. Our president's evidently a kind of polymath. He knows how to make suggestions to Coke, which presumably, if Coke accepts them, might become an internationally successful brand. You never know. What made Pyle so refreshing for people, I think, was it was a journalism from the bottom up. Ernie was a newspaper guy, and you and I were all today living through the perhaps death of newspapers. All over the country, they're dying. Even when they're not dying, they're shrinking. Sunday papers that used to look like this now look like that. Mm. And as ad revenues migrate to digital platforms, a lot of newspapers are either failing or they're saying the way to survive is to not rely on ad revenues, but to rely on digital subscriptions. And the way to maximize digital subscriptions is to stoke anger, clicks, and all that stuff. So that in Ernie's time, newspapers were unifying devices, unifying platforms. People, not just because people in Indiana would like to know in their community if there's going to be a stop sign at the corner of Green and Elm Street, or if there's going to be a traffic light down on Main Street, but because they covered the school board and they covered local weather problems. And people got their national news often from radio, maybe from Edward R. Murrow broadcasting from London during the Blitz. But newspapers were about things that weren't ideologically inflammatory. Stop signs and school board meetings and the local high school football coach and all that. Today, increasingly, journalism drives us apart. And Ernie Pyle wouldn't have contributed to that because he'd have gone right on writing about that guy in the bib overalls at the tobacco auction.
That's a great one. So it's coming up, you guys. Whoever's a fan of the complete works of Ernie Pyle on Substack, the column he's talking about.
Yeah, I mean, so it's a sobering and in some way dispiriting exercise to contrast journalism of newspapers of Ernie Pyle's day in journalism of Facebook and
Yeah.
YouTube and the social media of the age, perhaps, of the extinction of newspapers.
Yeah, whatever political persuasion Ernie was, he never really talked about it directly. He chose his subjects, and that was his editorializing.
I
That's how.
always knew what his politics were, and
Well,
I like it that way.
well, everybody, all the farmers were Democrats back then, right?
Yeah.
Assume that's where he sided with. But yeah, there's no way of knowing. I mean, there are some of his columns that you can pick things out based on what he says he's been reading and what he's doing. But he would never come out and tell you who to vote for. Write a political story. He'll write about people, even the politicians. He writes a lot about DC. And in fact, the stories, the reason I was going off the deep end there, and you pulled us back into Ernie Pyle, thank you, was there's a series coming up that Ernie spent in Tennessee writing about the Tennessee Valley Authority, which was the TVA, which was set up to create a hydroelectric dams system in Tennessee that was okayed or put together in the first part of the New Deal in 1933. And so I was bringing that up because I was wondering, because that had to have been in play for many years before that. It just pushed through in the New Deal, in the way of the New Deal, giving jobs to people, creating jobs, creating electricity for people.
Today, it's impossible for most Americans to understand how revolutionary the rural electrification program was for America. Americans who were isolated, I mean, farms were isolated, not just because you had to have a car, which not everyone had, to go to town over a pretty bad road, a road that might be impassable in the rain. Suddenly, rural electrification came along. You had electricity, you had light after dark, after the sun went down. You could plug in the Philco and the marvel of modern radio, which I think was more transformative than the internet for most Americans. How extraordinary this changed life. Now, you're talking about the TVA. That was controversial. Some people liked it. Some people thought it was inappropriate for government to get into the power business. But we also forget that in 1940, running against Roosevelt was the Republican nominee who was a utilities guy from Indiana, Wendell Willkie. And again, the utilities then, again, rural electrification and all that, things we take for granted were not taken for granted back then. And it was a revolutionary thing. It's like rural free delivery of the mails was another common sense federal government initiative that ended the loneliness that defined life for a great many Americans until electricity and the post office came to town, as it were.
That was great. Hey, there's one thing I want to bring up about back to the Wasco piece. I wrote you a letter or an email right afterwards. I'm not sure if you got it, but it was detailing the last letter home that Henry T. Wasco wrote before he died. Did you get a chance to look at that?
I don't think I did. If I did, I've forgotten.
Okay.
Please tell me.
It's up on our Substack. It's on the complete works of Ernie Pyle, and it is, let me see where I have it on my notes. It's on the May 26th, so it was on Memorial Day as well. It's the posting I put up about that, explaining it. And this is kind of one of the cool little things that we at the Ernie Pyle Legacy Foundation are responsible for, getting this out to the world, because we were in Belton, Texas a couple years ago, and we met with Captain Wasco's family. They call him Uncle Hank. And while I was there, I was telling him I'm going to orate the Wasco piece. And then his nephew says, have you ever read his last letter? I said, I had not. I would love to. And he shows it to me. And let me tell you, George, Ernie's a great writer. This man was too. And it just goes to show you how much as a society we have lost in not being letter writers anymore. I'll send it to you. I'll send you the link so you can read that. And I think it'd be a really good companion piece for you sometime to readdress that Wasco piece and show this. Because what stands out to me about it the most is that he's explaining to his family why he is a soldier and an American soldier. And it's not that he wants to die for his country. It's that he wants to live for it. And he wants to live in service to his country. And that goes beyond the uniform for him. And it's beautiful. And I got to read both of those back to back to a bunch of kids at the Henry T. Wasco Auditorium, Belton High School. And it was an honor. Those are the kinds of things that we do.
There's a sense in which Ernie Pyle is a window back into American society before we became post-literate, by which I mean we got a lot of people now. I mean, college teachers all say it's very hard to get young people to read, and to read very much, and to read anything complicated. Used to be able to assign them books. Now you assign them excerpts from books. We have a whole generation raised on, when it was Twitter, 140 characters. Then it got, wow, 280 characters. Well, you know, my goodness, that's not reading somehow. That's something else. That's the static and staccato communication of advertising. Back in Ernie's day, people read. And they read aloud to each other. And they could quote what they read. And they were, in school, they would memorize and recite things like Webster's reply to Senator Hayne, or the Gettysburg Address, and all that. And I don't want to get depressing on you here, but I don't know, once you've lost this, how you recover it.
And thank you for being with us, George.
Well, I've enjoyed it. It's been an honor, and thank you for the work you're doing on Ernie Pyle's behalf, which is really on all our behalfs.
Thank you, George, for being with us and for helping preserve the legacy of Ernie Pyle. And thank you for watching. For more information on the Ernie Pyle Legacy Foundation, visit pylefoundation.org. And don't forget to subscribe to the complete works of Ernie Pyle on Substack. From the Ernie Pyle Legacy Foundation, happy National Ernie Pyle Day 2025.